The mic waited for me like a dare. "Let's see if our less educated daughter-in-law can carry a tune," my mother-in-law said lightly, the way some people mention the weather. Glasses clinked. The band fell quiet. Cedar beams arched over the room, and the fairy lights made everyone's faces kind. "Go on then," she added, smiling at me and not smiling at all. "Don't keep us waiting." That was the moment I knew something had changed. Not in her. She'd been the same since the day I married her son. The change was in me. I was done pretending I didn't hear what she meant. I stood, smoothing the green dress I'd chosen because it made me feel like a pine tree, rooted. I touched my daughter's curls. Lila looked up, brave and borrowed from me. "You'll be great," she whispered, like a secret she wanted back. "I'm Maya. I'm 30-something, a mom, a part-time receptionist at a dental office, and when I let myself admit it, someone who sings. I didn't finish high school. Life got sharp too early, and I chose work over lectures and light blue hall passes. Once, though, in a tiled music room that smelled like pencil shavings and winter coats, I stood in a semicircle and let my voice fall into the voices beside me. The choir president pressed a pitch on the piano, the vowel lifted, and for a measure and a half, I felt like I belonged to something that didn't ask for proof. Later, I married Chaik. We reconnected through friends. He had a degree, a steady job, and a family who set their table as if for a recital, polished, precise. His mother, Vivian, had graduated top of her conservatory class decades ago and wore it the way some people wear heirloom rings. I wore my work shoes and the quiet pride of paying rent on time. When Lila asked me to teach her to sing, it felt like a door I'd pretended wasn't there had swung open on its own. I signed her up at a little studio near the library. She came home humming scales and asking if my throat ever buzzed like soda bubbles. I told her yes. I told her it meant she was finding notes that belonged to her. Then my mother-in-law called. "I'll take over," she said, gentle as a gavel. No reason to spend money on amateurs. She didn't call Lila an amateur. She didn't have to. I said no, soft at first, then firmer. Lila needs freedom to love this. My husband looked cornered by two women and chose the door with his mother's name on it. "Just for a while," he said. "She's better than anyone we can hire." Looking back now, I realized that was the first crack. Vivian arrived with a leather notebook and a pencil that made everything sound temporary. She corrected everything Lila did, then corrected the corrections. "Again," she said after almost every attempt. "Again." I stood in the kitchen and rinsed the same cup 3 times. The lesson, if that's what it was, lasted 4 hours and left my child quiet. "If singing means being yelled at, I don't want it," Lila said later, small in a big blanket. I sat on the edge of her bed and felt fury push up behind my ribs, thick as breath I couldn't exhale. I knew the shape of losing a joy. I would not let hers be taken. "Then we change course," I told her. "You get to choose." The next day I called the studio and apologized for the absence. Lila went back. Vivian went silent for a while. And now here we were, Grace's wedding in a cedar-lined barn at the edge of Maple Ridge. Chaik had just finished at the piano, and people were still applauding when Vivian leaned in. "I'm not feeling well," she murmured loud enough for the table. "Maya will sing alone." Later that night, I decided I was done being silent. I walked toward the stage. I hadn't planned to sing solo. The idea had been a family moment, Chaik playing, his mother, and I trading verses of something safe and bright. But safety is a kind of silence too, and I'd had enough. On stage, the band leader tilted his head. "What are you feeling?" he asked under his breath. "A decision," I said. I asked for a key. He nodded. The room folded into itself, a held breath. I didn't choose the easy song. I chose the one that remembered me. An aria I'd lived with, a page from the Marriage of Figaro that my high school director used to call pure architecture. Breath. Line. Lift. Then let the note carry itself. I hadn't sung it for an audience in years, but some music sleeps with one eye open. I thought of Lila's face the day she'd asked if singing could be fun again. I thought of Vivian's face when she said, "Again," as if repetition could scrub love down to the wood grain. I thought of the life I'd built, imperfect and ours. The first phrase left me like a string pulled gently from a spool. The second gathered light. By the third, my throat was a bell ringing from the inside, and the sound didn't feel like mine or anyone's. It felt like the room itself remembering a language it used to speak. Sometimes, when a note lands, the quiet changes shape. Somebody cried out a soft, "Wow," before they remembered where they were, and a line of warmth rose through me like standing near a stove in winter. I didn't look at Vivian. I didn't look at Chike. I looked at the back doors, where the trees were a dark audience of their own, and let the last sustained tone find a beam and rest there. Silence. Then the kind of applause that feels like rain on a tin roof, loud, sincere, not fancy. I bowed because it felt right, because my grandmother had once told me that gratitude should have a shape. When I returned to the table, Lila was glowing, 2 pink spots like thumbprints on her cheeks. "Teach me that," she said, too excited to keep her voice small. My mother-in-law said, "Anyone can sing like that." She smiled at me the way people smile in photographs they hate. I sipped water, let the compliment she refused to say pass by without catching at it. Grace, the bride, floated over on a cloud of veil and joy. "I want Mom to sing too," she announced, a little breathless. "I grew up with lessons. I've never heard her do a whole song." The room liked the idea. People called out encouragement. Vivian stood, pride as a spine, and made her way to the mic. I watched her the way I'd watch a storm, not hungry for damage, just alert. She began. The pitch wavered, then tried to steady itself and failed. Nerves can shake even steady hands, I know that. But the more she reached, the more the melody slipped. The room shifted into kindness. Polite smiles, softer applause, the charity we offer when we want to hurry past a moment without leaving a bruise. Back at the table, Vivian's color was high. "This," she hissed, "is why I didn't want to sing. If you had sung properly with me, Grace wouldn't have asked." It sounded to me like she wanted to hear her mother. I said, calm as a countertop. The daughter in her spoke before the musician. Vivian stared at me, as if I'd taken something. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd taken the story she told about what makes a person worthy. Later, while Grace and her new husband spun in their own gravity, I stood on the venue porch and breathed cedar and dew. Chike joined me carefully. "You were," he said, and stopped, looking for a word that wasn't fragile or huge. "I was myself," I offered. He nodded. "I'm sorry," he said then, and the apology had weight. "For choosing the easier fight. For asking Lila to give up the thing she loves to keep the peace with my mother. That was on me." He didn't reach for me. He let the apology stand on its own feet. "I'll fix it. Not with flowers. With boundaries." "That's a better bouquet," I said. Inside, Lila ran scales softly into her cup, like a secret practice. I kissed her hair and felt relief move through me like loosening a knot. Back then, when I was 17 and working nights at a diner that smelled like syrup and burnt coffee, the choir director called me a natural, with a voice that made nothing of it. She said it in passing, as if it were a coat I could choose to wear or not. I didn't know what to do with the compliment, so I hung it on a nail in my heart and left it there. Years later, Vivian held up her diploma like a passport and checked everyone else's papers. I used to think that if I behaved, if I kept my elbows tucked and my sentences shorter, she might stamp me admitted. It took having a daughter to realize I didn't want entrance to a place that made music a test. In the week when Vivian taught Lila, the house felt like a metronome ticking too loud. Lila practiced in fear, which is a way of practicing failure. I asked Vivian to go slower, to praise before she corrected. "This is me being gentle," she said, the way people say this is me smiling when they aren't. At night, I lay awake and cataloged my mistakes like receipts. Should I have fought sooner? Should I have taken Lila back to the studio the same day? Guilt is a busy, useless bird. It flaps around until it tires itself out and then builds a nest in your throat. Still, there were small mercies. Lila's teacher, Miss Carla, sent home a note that said, "We're working on joy first." She wrote, joy like a proper noun. I stuck the note on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon. Every time I reached for milk, I saw it. After the wedding, Vivian went quiet for 2 days, then arrived on our porch with indignation like a scarf. "I want an apology," she announced. "You humiliated me." "What would I be apologizing for?" I asked. "Singing well? Protecting my child's love of music? Breathing without asking?" She blinked. "Anger is a script. I'd wandered off it." "You made me sing a song I hate," she said. "You chose your song," I reminded her. "The same way you chose to make Lila cry." The old me would have stopped there. The new me, tired, clearer, didn't. "You taught your children that love sounds like again. Maybe that's the language you were taught too." I kept my voice even. "But in this house, love sounds like, what did you love about that? And do you want to try again because you want to? If that's a problem for you, the porch is as far as you get." Something in her face rearranged, like a chord resolving. She looked down at her hands, at the piano player's knuckles she no longer called on. "No one ever asked me what I loved about it," she said, almost to herself. We stood there with the porch boards creaking under us and the mail truck rattling past, and it felt, for a breath or two, like a beginning that didn't know its name yet. Chaik kept his word. He told his mother the new rules. Lila's studio came first. Feedback had to pass through kindness. Our door would close, gently but firmly, on any lesson that turned joy into dread. He said it simply, then repeated it when she tried to turn it into a debate. Meanwhile, Lila asked to hear the aria again. We didn't have a grand piano. We had a Bluetooth speaker and an app that could give a starting pitch. She sang along, careful and bright, stopping to laugh when her voice cracked and then trying again because she wanted to. One afternoon, Vivian stopped by while Lila practiced. She stood in the doorway the way you stand at the edge of a lake that's colder than you'd like. "You can tell me if this is unwanted," she said, voice small in a way I'd never heard. But I noticed she's lifting her chin on the higher notes. If she thinks of a string pulling the crown of her head instead, the line might feel easier. I nodded to Lila. "Want to try it?" She did. The note found a new angle and settled. "Thank you," Lila said to her grandmother, like a person does, not like a student terrified of a teacher. Vivian's eyes shone with something that wasn't triumph. "Of course," she said. That was the moment I knew something had changed. Grace texted a week later. "Dinner? I want to actually talk to you about the wedding and not just wave through a veil." At the restaurant, we sat near the window and watched Maple Ridge do its slow bustle. She squeezed my hand. "When you sang," she said, "I felt brave." "Is that strange?" "Not strange," I said. "Music is borrowed courage." She laughed, ordered fries, and told me the part one didn't see. The way Vivian looked at me while I sang, like someone who just realized the map they've been using forgot to include a whole city. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was grief. "Do I have to be tender because she's my mother?" Grace asked, crisp and honest. "You get to be clear," I said. At home that night, Vivian called. She spoke in the careful tone people use when they're not sure which word hurt. "If I asked you to teach me," she said, "would you laugh?" "I might make you do lip trills," I said. "But I won't laugh." "I was taught to win," she admitted. "Not to love." A beat. Lila loves. I'd like to learn that part. We met in our living room the next afternoon. I set a timer. 30 minutes, I said. No self-insults. Every time you say something cruel about your voice, we do 5 minutes of breathing instead. She smirked, then caught herself and nodded. We worked posture, breath, the easy alchemy of vowel and airflow. When she started to grip, I said, "Think about warmth. Think about holding Lila's hand when she's nervous. Sing like that." She did. The tone rounded. Not brilliant yet, not secure, but honest. She looked surprised, as if kindness were a lever she hadn't tried pulling. Chaik watched from the kitchen doorway, drying a dish he'd already dried. He mouthed, "Thank you." I shook my head. "Do your homework," I mouthed back, meaning, "keep your boundaries." He smiled, got it. Later, after Vivian left with a penciled set of exercises and a promise to practice only as long as joy lasted, Lila crawled into my lap with her workbook. Grandma said I should picture the note floating like a paper lantern. She reported pleased. I like that. Me too, I said, surprised by the gentleness that had entered our house without knocking. The next family gathering was quieter. No staged tests, no teasing that pretended to be love and wasn't. Vivian asked Lila to sing only if she wanted. Lila did. We clapped the kind of clap that's not about the clapper, just about the person standing and trying. Toward the end of the evening, Vivian said, "Maya, would you?" She didn't finish the sentence, but I knew. I stood and sang the opening of the aria, not to show anyone anything, just to set the ceiling a little higher so we could all stand up straighter under it. When I finished, Vivian put her hand over her mouth the way people do when they're keeping something tender from escaping too fast. "I'm sorry," she said at last, "not just for the night at the barn, but for all the little cuts that led there." "I accept," I said. Forgiveness isn't a door that swings wide on the first push. It hinges your oil over time. Weeks later, our house sounded like a house that belonged to us, a kettle clicking off, a metronome that forgot to tick, Lila laughing when she missed, and then finding it clean. Sometimes we went to karaoke with Vivian and picked songs that made us grin. She listened more than she corrected. When she did offer a thought, it came wrapped in softness. One Saturday morning, Lila set her music on the coffee table. "This one's hard," she announced, serious in the way only a child can be serious. "But I want to sing it beautifully." "You will," I said, because she would, because beauty is the way you try. She took a breath and began. A neighbor's dog barked. A delivery truck sighed. Sunlight made a quilt on the rug. Lila's voice threaded through all of it, ordinary and brand new. My husband slipped an arm around my waist in a way that said he'd learned something, to stand beside and not in front. "You did this," he said quietly. "We did," I corrected, because accountability counts, but so does repair. As for me, I remembered the girl in the tiled room who didn't know where to hang a compliment. I think she would like this life. The small moments that add up to a full song, the choice to turn away from humiliation and toward craft, the knowledge that I don't have to audition to be allowed in my own story. Sometimes losing everything isn't the end. It's the start of finally choosing yourself. Lila reached the measure that scared her and didn't flinch. She sang it again because she wanted to, and then once more just to feel the line settle. When she finished, we sat in the echo for a beat. That was the moment I knew something had changed, I told her. "What changed?" she asked, grinning, breathless. "You did," I said. "And so did we." Thank you for walking this path with me. Every story reminds us that strength often hides behind heartbreak. If this one touched you, stay with us, where every story reveals another truth of the human heart. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so more stories like this can find the people who need them most.